There's less than a week left until the parliamentary elections in Hungary. Incumbent Prime Minister Viktor Orban continues his election campaign built on anti-European and anti-Ukrainian rhetoric. Propaganda videos created with artificial intelligence are spreading online, while campaign posters from the ruling Fidesz party, styled to look like opposition materials, are appearing on the streets. And yet, according to independent polls, the ruling party still hasn't managed to close the gap with the opposition Tisza party, and in cities that were once considered Orban strongholds, his campaign rallies are being disrupted. What are the chances that the head of the Hungarian government will hold on to power this time? Let's break it down. Right now, the Tisza party's chances of winning are quite high. Most opposition political forces have refused to participate in the elections in order to maximize voter consolidation around Tisza. And a poll conducted by the independent 21 Research Center shows that right now, 56% of voters who have already made up their minds support Tisza, which is 3% higher than at the beginning of March. At the same time, Fidesz is supported by 37% of respondents, which is 2% less than 3 weeks ago.
I really want to see change. Of course, I will vote for the Tisza party. We need to change this regime, so I'm for them. I will vote for change. I'm putting my hopes in them, and I think many of us are hoping for this too.
I will vote for the current government to step down, and I would like Hungary to become a livable place. That's all.
The main complaint Hungarians have about the current government is corruption, which over Viktor Orban's 16 years in power has seriously undermined the country's economy and, as a result, led to a low standard of living. However, in the city of Győr, when hundreds of activists at a campaign rally demanded explanations from the head of government about corruption schemes and the difficult economic situation, all the current prime minister could do was shout into the microphone and accuse the protesters of working for Kiev.
You support the Ukrainian side instead of standing with the Hungarians. You want a pro-Ukrainian government and want to give Hungarian money to Ukraine.
Hungary has a mixed electoral system with single-member districts, which traditionally gives an advantage to the ruling party, especially in rural regions. This means that even with a smaller share of the vote, Fidesz can win more seats in parliament. However, analysts are calling these elections the toughest for Viktor Orban in his 16 years in power. And another factor is that a record number of people have already registered to vote from abroad. Most voters at overseas polling stations are young people who are drawn to the opposition party Tisza. In addition, Hungary is also seeing a surge in so-called vote transfers. This is when citizens vote somewhere other than where they permanently reside, but their votes are counted in their home electoral district. Experts predict that the number of such votes in this election will also be a record high. And this trend is seen as favorable for the opposition.
An artificially altered map of electoral districts, a high proportion of voters living abroad, and minority representation in Hungary, these are the three factors that help the Fidesz party balance out the potential advantages of the Tisza party. But if Tisza outpaces Fidesz by at least 5% on the party lists, you can be sure it will secure a majority in parliament.
And while the opposition is raising legitimate questions about inflation, corruption, and other pressing issues in the country, Fidesz, led by Orban, blames Brussels and Kyiv for all the problems. The current election campaign by the ruling party is rife with scandals. A photo of the president of Ukraine next to Tisza leader Péter Magyar is no longer a new tactic. But fake opposition posters, that's a new tactic. In the city of Debrecen, unknown individuals put up posters featuring photos of opposition politicians from the Tisza party, but with one twist: all the text was written in Ukrainian. In addition, Fidesz's official pages shared a video created with artificial intelligence. The video shows a little girl waiting for her father to return from the war, then cuts to scenes of her supposed father with his eyes blindfolded and his hands tied, and then he is executed. The content hints at what Viktor Orban has repeatedly claimed, that his main rival, opposition leader Péter Magyar, is allegedly planning to drag Hungary into Russia's war against Ukraine.
Hungarians still believe that membership in the European Union and NATO is the key to peace and development for Hungary. I think this will truly be a referendum on our country's place in the world. I believe that Tisza will win a convincing victory in the elections because even Fidesz voters don't want our country to become a puppet state of Russia, a colony, or just an assembly plant instead of being part of Europe.
Orban denies using dirty campaign tactics that echo Russian practices. He also denies that Russian political strategists are involved in the campaign. According to the Washington Post, they even suggested staging an assassination attempt on the Hungarian prime minister with an alleged Ukrainian connection to boost his ratings. But that never actually happened. But now, Serbian President Alexander Vučić has claimed that explosives were allegedly found on the pipeline that delivers Russian gas to Hungary.
For several weeks now, we've been receiving reports from various sources that after failed false flag operations and the collapse in popularity of the Fidesz party, Viktor Orban, relying on support from Serbia and Russia, is planning to cross the line once again. Many have publicly stated that something would accidentally happen to the pipeline in Serbia on Easter just a week before the elections in Hungary. And that's exactly what happened. I urge Viktor Orban to stop, at least during the holiday. Spreading panic and creating chaos is devised by his Russian advisors. Péter Magyar, leader of the opposition Tisza party, Facebook.
It seems that Hungarian voters can also unmistakably recognize the style of Russian political strategists. So it's no surprise that at one of Viktor Orban's campaign rallies, people were chanting the slogan, "Russians go home." It's a phrase remembered in Hungary since 70 years ago, when Soviet tanks invaded Budapest. Russians go home. 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 Apparently, so that citizens wouldn't have any suspicions about his ties to Putin, Orban called on the European Union to lift sanctions against Russia. The head of the Hungarian government is convinced that the European economy faces an energy crisis and further price increases. And in his opinion, the only way to prevent these risks is to lift the restrictions against Moscow. And Viktor Orban also demanded that the European Union force Ukraine to resume deliveries of Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline. But for some reason, he forgot to demand that Russia stop attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure and didn't mention the real reason for the halt in oil transit, the damage to the pipeline caused by Russian shelling. I demand that Brussels immediately lift the sanctions and restrictions on Russian energy. Brussels must force President Zelensky to immediately reopen the Druzhba pipeline. And we must reject the plans that propose abandoning investments in Russian energy and switching to Brussels' more expensive and inaccessible energy policy. There are only a few days left before the vote in Hungary, and while polling and voter sentiment are working against the ruling party, their reliance on harsh anti-European and anti-Ukrainian rhetoric not only isn't helping, but actually seems to be weakening their position. The opposition wants the country to return to a European agenda. Will they be able to turn Budapest back toward Brussels? Let's see.